It's a difficult thing to navigate the disappearance of a loved one. Families and friends are left unsure of how to grieve and with so many questions unanswered. But when those who go missing suddenly turn up alive, it's not always easier and sometimes can be just as startling and hard to adjust to. Join us for this episode as we examine 3 cases of people who disappeared, then reappeared years later. Lula Cora Hood. 44-year-old Lula Cora Hood was last seen in 1970 in Illinois, following what her daughter described as a family squabble. Grace Cavisto was just 15 when her mum left her life, but noted that it wasn't the first time Lula had done such a thing, though it would, seemingly, be the last. Grace told KWQC.com she had left many times before that and had just come back. Lula reportedly struggled with unspecified mental illness and found it challenging to take care of her children, Grace, Joanne, Owen, and David. The 4 were adopted by her sister Hazel in order to ease her load, with Lula visiting fairly often. However, on this particular day, she walked out of her children's lives and never returned. For decades, nobody knew what had happened to her. Though the family searched, Lula was never reported missing because she was known as a wanderer. On May 5, 1996, the case took a turn when the skeletal remains of a woman were discovered in a kiln in the Purrington Paver Brickyards in East Galesburg, Illinois. Jane Doe was believed to have died between 1984 and 1996, and her remains have been found by a mushroom forager. She had been wrapped in a bin bag and was described by investigators as a white woman who was short, heavy-set, and middle-aged. Over 100 missing persons were noted to be potential matches to Jane Doe, and in 1998, investigators found a tentative match when a woman named Joanne Allen reached out to them, believing that the facial reconstruction resembled her mother, Lula Cora Hood. Lula fit the age range of Jane Doe and had spent time living in Galesburg, even at one point living across from the Brickyards. Since DNA testing was not available at the time, the case was pretty much closed by investigators, who felt that Lula's daughter had correctly identified her. A memorial for the 44-year-old was held, but police kept a hold of the remains until they could be concretely identified. For years, the case remained untouched, but in 2008, new DNA testing meant that Lula's daughters could provide samples which could be matched to Jane Doe. Another 2 years passed before the testing was completed, and in 2011, it was announced that Jane Doe was not, in fact, Lula Cora Hood. Another one of her daughters, Debbie, stated that she'd always known that Jane Doe wasn't her mother, stating, "I looked at the facial reconstruction and said, that was not my mother. In my heart and in my gut, I felt that it isn't her." Much to the surprise of Lula's family, though, the DNA testing soon gave them answers as to the whereabouts of their missing mother. Detective Sergeant Jason Landers told the media, "We were able to get a name, and there was a connection from Jacksonville, Florida, because her oldest daughter was born there. Within about 30 days, we were lucky enough to find Cora Hood living down in Jacksonville." DNA testing of the individual believed to be Lula, who was going by a different surname, showed this was indeed the missing woman. Her daughter Grace went down to see her mother with her cousin and adopted sister, Bernadine Colas. Bernadine told the Register Mail, "We said as we were heading down there, I'm not going to cry. And of course, when we all saw each other, me and my sister and Aunt Cora, all 3 of us cried. We were so happy." Grace added, "As a kid, all you see is that your mother left. Then you realize it was because she couldn't take care of us, so I was excited and I cried. I never would have thought I would have that reaction, but I sure did." When Grace reunited with her mother, she was living in appalling conditions, but eventually she moved to Dayton, Ohio to live with her other daughter, Debbie. She started visiting Galesburg every year as part of a family reunion tradition. Sadly, Grace and Joanne's brothers, Owen and David, died before their mother was found. The Jane Doe discovered in the brickyards in East Galesburg was identified in 2013 as Helen Ruth Alps, after her daughter provided her DNA to the police for comparison. She is believed to have died between the spring of 1988 and November 1991, and the circumstances of her death are still being investigated. The police have noted that she would have been between 47 and 50 at the time of her death, and driving a green 1976 Ford LTD with possible damage to the front driver's side corner. Anyone with information about Ruth's case can contact the Knox County Sheriff's Office at 309-344-0044. Chioma Gray. Born on April 27, 1992, Chioma Gray was raised in a normal, loving family and was one of 4 children. As a teenager, she attended Buena High School in Ventura, California, and hoped to one day make it into medical school so she could study to become a gynecologist. But everything changed in December of 2007 when Chioma suddenly vanished. On the morning of December 13th, the 15-year-old was dropped off at school by her father and brother, but she failed to show up to classes. Her family weren't aware she was missing until her mother turned up to the school to pick her up. They filed a report with the police at 5:30 p.m. It didn't take long, however, for detectives to find a possible suspect, 20-year-old Andrew Joshua Tafoya, an acquaintance of her brother. Chioma met Tafoya when she was 14 and he was 19. The pair subsequently developed a romantic relationship, much to the frustration of her parents. Her mother, Francine, became so upset by Tafoya's interest in her daughter that in March of 2007, she reported him to the police and he was arrested on charges of having unlawful sex with a minor. He was given 7 months in prison, but was allowed out during the day to work. He ultimately served 147 of his 210-day sentence before being released on the condition that he not contact Chioma or any other child without the presence of an adult. By the time of Chioma's disappearance, Tafoya had just been released from prison. More damningly still, a vehicle had been stolen from a lot where he used to work cleaning cars. Authorities looked into the CCTV around the school and discovered that a car had pulled up outside the school that morning, matching the description of the missing vehicle. Following this, the police issued a warrant for Tafoya's arrest, believing that he was responsible for the 15-year-old's disappearance. They investigated the case as a felony for child stealing, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, car theft, and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Although numerous sightings were reported of the pair in Mexico over the next few years, Tafoya remained at large, and Chioma was not tracked down. The most notable of these sightings was of Chioma in August of 2008, when she was spotted working in a restaurant in Acapulco. A private investigator named Chuck Hoekstra knew Chioma's mother and offered to work the case for free. In 2010, he discovered the stolen car with flat tires parked in a compound near Acapulco, and before long, he uncovered that the pair were still living and working in Mexico, Tafoya as a snorkeling instructor, while Chioma was a waitress. He also learned that Tafoya received help from his family, presumably monetary, although it is unspecified in articles about the case. The PI subsequently distributed flyers looking for information about the couple, which led him to speak with one of Chioma's co-workers. The co-worker revealed that Chioma had gotten pregnant, and the pair wanted to have their baby in the US. Her mother, Francine, was furious at the news, and soon filed a lawsuit against Tafoya and his parents, with plans to also sue Ventura County Probation Department for failing to inform them that Tafoya had been released from prison. On September 1st, 2011, Francine received a phone call requesting that she come to Mexico to pick up Chioma and take her home. The call was from Tafoya, and reportedly, she asked for a specific location but was not given one. Tafoya then decided to call the FBI, agreeing to meet them at Los Angeles International Airport on October 5th, 2011. When the pair touched down, Chioma was met by her family, who cried tears of joy, while Tafoya was arrested and charged with felony child stealing and felony probation violation. Chioma told her family that she was not aware of the efforts they'd made to find her. Francine stated, "She couldn't believe it. It sort of made me feel like she was under the impression that we were not looking." Another surprise soon came when the family learned that the pair had gotten married while in Mexico. After spending a few days with her own family, Chioma then moved in with her husband's family. In January of 2012, Tafoya pled guilty to the charges against him and received a 2-year prison sentence. Alex Cooper. On the morning of April 4th, 1987, the daughter of 65-year-old Alex Cooper was on her way to the shops when she spotted her father's vehicle near the Mitchell Hotel in Sparwood, British Columbia, Canada. She stopped by the car and went to speak with him to make sure that everything was okay, and assumed that he was fishing in the nearby Crayon Creek, but a quick glance revealed that he wasn't down on the riverbank, nor was he in his car. Concerned, Layla called her mother, Margaret. Alex had a known heart condition, and she was afraid that something had happened. Margaret told her that she hadn't seen him since the previous day, as he was supposed to be on a business trip, something Alex did often as part of his job as a salesperson, so they decided to file a missing persons report with the police. Investigators arrived on the scene but were baffled right away, as there was nothing to indicate a struggle and no evidence of the 65-year-old. A search of the surrounding area turned up nothing. Retracing his movements from the previous day, authorities learned that Alex had eaten lunch at a restaurant less than a mile from where his car was located. Margaret, meanwhile, told police that her husband often used cash and would usually have a wad of it on his person. She worried that he'd been attacked by someone looking to steal his money. His daughter, however, feared that he'd fallen into the water after suffering a heart attack. Eventually, authorities began to speculate that Alex had left of his own volition. His family disputed this because he'd left all his credit and debit cards at home, as well as his heart medication. A year later, with nothing more to go on, Margaret decided to petition the courts to have Alex declared dead, a request which was granted. Shortly afterwards, she attempted to find his birth certificate, but couldn't. When she went to request a copy, she was unable to find any record of her husband. Similarly, she couldn't find any information on him before the pair tied the knot in 1952, and the family began speculating that Alex had been hiding something from them. Over the next few years, however, nothing came to light. It wasn't until May 1991 that a break in the case came, when a man in Toronto was reported missing. The man was using the name David Cooper and claimed to be a traveling salesman. Looking at the photo provided, the police noted that he bore a striking resemblance to the missing Alex Cooper. David had been living in a boarding house for around a year and was known to sell meat products to families by way of phone calls. His landlady reported him missing when he didn't return home from a business trip after 4 days. While investigators looked around his room at the boarding house, they discovered a photo of Alex Cooper holding his grandchild. David Cooper returned home a short time later and discovered the leftovers of police evidence collection, like fingerprint dust, around the room. His landlady promptly told him that he'd been reported missing and that the police had been to investigate, but by the time authorities arrived to speak with him, David Cooper had fled. No new leads emerged throughout the rest of the year, but in September of 1991, just a few months after David Cooper was reported missing, Unsolved Mysteries featured the bizarre case on their show, which led to another important break in the case. Someone who'd watched the show recognized Alex's photo and contacted the authorities. Alex was finally tracked down on January 10th, 1992, to Hamilton, Canada. He explained that his real name was Albin Arsene Arsenault, and that in 1949, when he was 26 years old, he was falsely accused of participating in the robbery of a Union Pacific Railroad office where he'd worked for some time. In a bid to avoid serving time for a crime he didn't commit, Alex changed his name and fled, eventually meeting and marrying Margaret in the early 1950s and having 5 children together. Alex didn't consider that the charges against him had likely been dropped at this point, and when he turned 65, he feared being exposed because he needed a birth certificate to claim his pension, something which he did not have. Rather than come clean, he decided to disappear, even though he stated that he hated being away from his family and suffered from homesickness. After he was located, he spent 2 days speaking with the police before he returned to British Columbia and reunited with his family. His wife, Margaret, passed away just 4 years later in 1996. Alex died in 2007, aged 85. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own thoughts and reactions, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.